In 2012, I had the privilege with historian Maria Young to interview Mrs. Hannah Murphy in Rosscarbery. At the time, she was 101 years old. She had spent most of her life in Ross and had witnessed major events in history, including the War of Independence. She remembered the Black and Tans driving into Rosscarbery in their lorries.
I used to be skipping my rope out in the street, a beautiful summer's evening, and a load of soldiers came up. "We want blood, we want blood," coming from Clonakilty into the square in Rosscarbery. "We want blood." Well, it was, it was my parents, there were 7 of us in family. I had 4 brothers, and any one of them could be taken out and shot.
On a number of occasions during the War of Independence, the IRA carried out sniping attacks from Arda Hill overlooking Rosscarbery against RIC and military positions. Hannah recalled those attacks.
From the hill above them, there used to be ambushes. There were bullets. They'd attack from the hill up there, the hill.
The height here?
Yeah, the hill from the height, yes. And the bullets rang through the house. They'd fly through the house, and get stuck at the back. And it was so dangerous. I don't know how we escaped. We were very lucky.
About 70 men of the 3rd Cork Brigade Flying Column of the IRA, under the command of Tom Barry, carried out a dramatic attack on the well-fortified RIC Barracks in Rosscarbery on the night of the 30th into the 31st of March 1921. The IRA exploded a mine at the front wall of the barracks, which failed to create a breach big enough through which the IRA could storm the building. In this photograph you can see marked with the yellow arrow the side of a porch in front of the barracks, and marked with the red arrow is the top bar of a pedestrian gate through which the IRA men had to carry the mine. When the mine exploded that night, it did a lot of damage to the house across the street, which belonged to the O'Mahony family. As the IRA couldn't storm the building, a firefight continued for a number of hours, with RIC men and Black and Tans in the barracks exchanging gunfire and hand grenades with the IRA attackers outside. Today the Garda station in Rosscarbery occupies part of the old RIC Barracks site, and in 1921 the IRA officers, including Tom Barry, used the house on the left, now painted blue, as cover to fire on the barracks and throw grenades into the building. In the end, the IRA used paraffin and petrol to set the barracks on fire, and the garrison evacuated the building by sliding down the lean-to roof at the back. Hannah Murphy lived in Cross Lane in Rosscarbery, marked with blue, which was a short distance from the RIC barracks marked with red. She well remembered the attack on the barracks by the IRA.
The night the barrack was blown up, the barrack was across the street there, that's the barrack garden there. The night the barrack was blown up, we left the house here we went away to the very bottom of the garden. We have a garden away back, and we stood with our backs to the wall looking up at the barrack, and the soldiers, they jumped the wall there and ran to the convent for shelter. The nuns took them in.
The day after the attack on the barracks in Rosscarbery, people came into town to attend the fair. A child found a hand grenade on the street and gave it to a Black and Tan, who threw the grenade away. The grenade exploded and it killed Patrick Collins and George Wilson. A 4-year-old boy, Francis Fitzpatrick, would later die from his wounds. Hannah Murphy recalled seeing the bodies on the street, but as an 11-year-old, she thought the victims were shot rather than being killed by grenade fragments, which was the case.
Well, the whole place there wasn't a pane of glass left in the window, and there was the street, the square, was all slates and glass. You couldn't walk. The following day, it was a fair day in Ross, and some people heard the explosion within a certain distance outside the town of Ross. And they, of course, more of them didn't hear, they came into the fair. but the result there were a lot of people came into the fair and came into the mess when they didn't know the difference until they arrived in Ross. And this man from Derry, he was
Wilson.
he was he come in. He got a bullet. He was shot dead. My brother and I were looking down on him, and my brother and somebody else they had got a stretcher and put it. I went with him. I was a child. I was 11 years old, and I walked with him. You know, I remember it well. They put him in a stretcher and took him down to the Protestant Cathedral, Protestant Church down here. They took him down and in there, to be for burial. And
The RIC Barracks was burnt to a shell the night of the attack, and this photograph shows members of the British forces standing in the ruins afterwards. A black and tan constable, Charles Bowles, was killed in the fight. His remains were sent back to England. An RIC sergeant called Ambrose O'Shea also died in the barracks, and we can see from the Skibbereen Eagle of the 16th of April 1921 his remains were buried in the Abbey Cemetery in Rosscarbery. After the successful attack on Rosscarbery Barracks, Michael Collins sent the following message from Dublin to the adjutant of the 3rd Cork Brigade, and I quote, Óglaigh na hÉireann, April 7th, 1921. To the Brigade Adjutant, Cork 3 Brigade. I have just received report of the Rosscarbery fight. It was a splendid performance, and as I know the position of the place so well, I appreciate it all the more. I hope sometime shortly to make the acquaintance of the officer who arranged this encounter and carried it out with such gallantry and efficiency. Signed, Director of Intelligence. End quote. The ruins of Rosscarbery Barracks stood for many decades after its destruction. This photograph was taken from the square side of the ruin. This photograph was taken after the site was cleaned up. And this coloured photograph was taken in the 1950s. The ruins were removed in the 1960s and a new Garda station and houses were built on the site. But if you look around, you can still see the old boundary wall of the RIC Barracks in the background, and on the side of the street you can see rusty hand grenade fragments still embedded in the curbstones in front of the Garda station. Hannah Murphy passed away on the 31st of December 2015.